Hello everyone, I'm Mark Porth, developer advocate at Balena. I was about to install a server using a Docker container. Well, maybe not a server like the one you might be thinking, but it serves data to my application. Probably, if you're at DockerCon watching this session, you're already familiar with deploying Docker containers on your infrastructure, your cloud, your desktop. But as you can see, my device don't have these luxuries. This is a Raspberry Pi. It's a single board computer that is one of the most used Internet of Things devices. On this talk, I will cover how to run Docker containers from your Docker desktop to devices like this, like a Raspberry Pi. And at the end of this talk, you will know how to scale your project into the real world. And to do it, we are going to use Docker containers and Balena. Before starting the journey from Docker desktop containers to big fleets of IoT devices running Docker containers, I would love to share something that changed my life, and this is why I'm into the Internet of Things world, when I read it 15 years ago. And actually was this paper from Mark Weiser. He was a researcher at Xerox Labs, and he wrote this paper in 1991 called The Computer of the 21st Century. And when I read the first sentence that says the most profound technologies are those that disappear, I just started to think about how to implement the Internet of Things and go towards that direction. And actually 30 years later, after this paper was published, I think we are closer and closer to the vision of Mark Weiser had. And I said we are closer to this vision because I think Docker containers are helping to making this vision possible with embedded devices into the Internet of Things. And as well, I wanted to share that Balena has a long history enabling IoT developers to build Docker containers on embedded devices. So November 2013, with the help of an employee from Docker, Balena, in that time was called Resin, deployed or implemented Docker running on Raspberry Pi. But just in case someone is saying, okay, who is Balena? What is Balena that Mark is talking about? Maybe you have used a software like this. This is Etcher. This is one of the most famous tools to flash SD cards or USB drives. If you use it, please say hello on the chat, raise your hand virtually or physically. Looking forward to know the ones who usually use Etcher. If you haven't, this is a great software to flash SD cards or USB drives just to install new operating systems on devices that you have. And if you use it, you already used software made by Balena. Okay, so let's start. I was not joking when I was saying that I wanted to deploy a server next to me with a Raspberry Pi. And actually, I'm going to show you in a second. But first of all, we will explore how a simple example of a Dockerfile or a Docker image on Docker Hub running on your laptop, it's possible to migrate that into an IoT device, such as a Raspberry Pi. To do that, I choose a project that I really love, because actually what I needed is a security cam for my house. Maybe some of you as well need that project too. So for that, I choose Kerberos. Before starting, I want to give you some seconds. So I'm going to use now Docker Desktop for this. So, and after that, I'm going to use a Raspberry Pi. And if you have a Raspberry Pi, I'm going to give you some seconds that you go, pick it up, and let's play together. Kerberos, it's a project, it's a free and open source project that creates security cameras that can run on your laptop or on any IoT device. And most of them run on Docker containers. If you go to the documentation on kerberos.io, you will be able to find all the documentation to deploy it. But this is what I did. So I went to the documentation and I just deployed on my Docker desktop. I opened my terminal and I just run, Docker run, the name, the ports that I need, and just the Docker Hub image from Kerberos. It pulled the image, download the image, and start the container. And basically, after deleting a lot of containers that I had just for the purpose of this presentation, I have the container running on my Docker desktop. And it works. It's simple, it's quick, and it's amazing. Congratulations. And actually, if you want to have a security camera, you just need to type on your browser localhost, and then you start all the setup process of Kerberos. But yeah, at this point, I had a security camera running on my laptop, and yeah, now how can I build more? How I can have a second camera? And yeah, and if I'm very successful, how can I build 500 of these? These are some of the problems I found actually to scale these. First of all, it was really hard to get the stream from my webcam or from a USB camera connected to my laptop. If someone needs sensors connected to the laptop, it's hard, or it doesn't have like an easy GPIO. You need USB or something complicated. It's interesting when you, on your Docker desktop, you can simulate or you can mock the GPIO from Raspberry Pi, for example. This is super interesting, but this is another exercise. I don't want to hammer my laptop on the wall at home or leave it there. When I leave home, I always bring my laptop with me, so this is a completely useless security camera, and it's expensive to scale, so I don't want to buy laptops to do that. So devices like Raspberry Pis or single-board computers are the perfect fit for projects like this. Okay, because like $35 cost of a device like this enables, to set up as much as cameras as you need at home, or to build 500 or scale to thousands. So as said before, so we are moving from a container or a Docker image running on my Docker desktop. Let's move that image into Raspberry Pi. But let me say something else. Deploying this Docker container on one Raspberry Pi, that's kind of simple. But then when you have 9 Raspberry Pis on your table, that starts to be a little bit more complex, right? And even when they are not on your table, that's complicated, because containers sometimes are not perfectly built on the first time. And even they are not static or perpetual, they need to be updated. So how are you gonna update these containers running on the Raspberry Pis, for example? And if you don't have 9, you have that amount of devices, and they are heterogeneous from different brands, maybe different architectures. Actually, if you're in this point, you have 2 solutions. One, it's, as I like to say, to take the hard way. So to install Raspbian OS or another Linux operating system, install Docker, and start fighting to deploy all of the containers on your devices and install them, etc. Or you can use something like Balena. Just clicking a button like this can deploy Kerberos on a Raspberry Pi in some simple steps. Let me explain really briefly what is Balena. Actually, Balena are different products. First of all, there is Balena OS, which is an open source Linux operating system based on Yocto. And the interesting part of Balena OS it's that it only runs containers. You cannot run anything on the host OS. Actually, the container engine that we use at Balena, it's called Balena Engine, that it's based on Docker, actually on the Mobi project from Docker. Another product, it's balenaCloud, which is a web interface to manage all of your devices connected. Actually, it's free up to 10 devices, so you can use it for free during this demo. No credit card required, anything, and you just can connect 10 devices running Docker containers on it. And there is the open source flavor of balenaCloud, which is called OpenBalena. The other 2 products, you already know Balena Etcher, I already introduced. And Balena Fin, it's hardware. We learn from our customers the frictions that they had scaling their IoT solutions. And this is how we learn to do hardware to help them to scale faster. Inside a device running on Balena, we have Balena operating system, which has the Linux kernel, a set based on Yocto, with all the definitions from the CPU and GPIO and so on. We have the systemd, network manager, and others. And then we have the Balena engine. On the top of that, we have the containers. One of the containers that always run on Balena devices, it's a supervisor, which is an agent actually that it's connected with the balenaCloud or OpenBalena over API, and it's always checking if there are new releases to deploy on the device. if there is a new release, an over-the-air update, the supervisor just get a message from the Balena Cloud and just start downloading all the containers. When they are downloaded, it just change the previous, just delete the previous containers and start the new ones. Actually, when you push Docker containers on Balena, your Git repository actually gets into the workflow of Balena Cloud. The Balena builders just converts all your source code into Docker registries. And then when there is a new release on the Balena Cloud or OpenBalena, the supervisor gets alerted and it just starts downloading the new images of the containers. Then as well, the devices has a VPN, so you can access over a VPN to the devices, and over the API, the users can see what is happening in real time on the devices. You're going to see that in a second. So let's build it with me. You have your Raspberry Pi? Yeah? Okay, just let's build it together. To deploy Kerberos on a Raspberry Pi, I created a repository. It's basically a fork from the Kerberos repository. They have a special Kerberos Balena repository, but basically it's a similar Dockerfile template that we installed that supports different multi-architectures, ARC64 for 64-bit, ARC64 for 64-bit ARM devices such as the Raspberry Pi 3 and 4, AMD64, which is like Intel NUCs, all the Intel devices, x86 devices, and ARM-v7, which are 32-bit ARM devices, such as the Raspberry Pi 3, etc. To do it, I'm going to do something super simple. I'm going to click Deploy with Balena. And clicking Deploy with Balena, if you don't have Balena Cloud account, that's not a problem. So you will appear on the sign up page. As me, I do have an account, so what is going to happen to me is it's going to say, okay, where do you want to deploy it? Create and deploy a fleet. I'm going to use a fleet that they already have, that it's called DockerCon 2022, okay? But in your case, you will need to create a fleet, okay? You just click Deploy to Fleet. And what is going to happen is that the source code, the Docker compose that we then check on the repository with everything that it's in there, it's going to get deployed on the fleet that it's called DockerCon 2022. Actually, next step that we need to do is to add a device. Add a device actually allows us to download the Balena operating system, okay, that it's going to run the containers that we are deploying. So in this case, I'm going to download Balena OS, not the ESR, with development, and introducing your Wi-Fi credentials, you're going to be able to download an operating system image with already your credentials installed. So with that credentials installed, just putting the SD card on your device and powering it up, it will appear automatically on Balena Cloud. Okay. In my case, I'm not going to do it as I already did. I have my device here connected. We have here the device. Actually, if you toggle on public device URL, you can see that everything is up and running. Okay. We see the device up and running. And we can see the camera pointing to me. Okay, at this time. So it's working well. I have already some statistics from the day. So it's running well. To configure this is important. I'm using a PlayStation Eye webcam for this. But actually, it's important that when you configure this with your Raspberry Pi, you go to configuration, click USB camera, and it's important that the resolution of the camera is properly introduced here. Okay, just click confirm and select, and just update. Okay, so it worked well. Actually, let me share the Docker Compose that we have here. So actually, at Balena, we only support till version 2.1 of Docker Compose. Okay, we have some volumes, and we have a service called main, I don't know why, which is privileged, the volumes, the labels needed, etc. Okay, so now I want to add another container here. I think that it could be really interesting to add a new container. And actually, I already selected the new container. We are going to deploy another container called netdata because I want to monitor this Raspberry Pi. I want to monitor the performance of the CPU, if it has any problem, if it gets overheated, or whatever it's happening, like the CPU, etc. Okay, this is an open source package as well. There is a Docker Happy image called netdata. You can deploy it as well on your Docker desktop. If you just Docker run netdata/netdata, it works really good. Okay. In this case, this developer from the community actually deployed this netdata project and this Docker Compose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge both Docker Compose. Let's play a little bit with VI. Let's go. First of all, I'm going to clone the Kerberos Balena repository. Okay, we are cloning. Okay. So now I'm gonna clone this project, netdata block. And what I'm gonna do, I only need the Docker Compose actually. I'm gonna move the netdata folder that we see on the left to this folder. So we have this. So I'm gonna move netdata here, and what we are gonna do actually is I'm gonna copy the Docker file template, the Docker Compose from netdata. I'm gonna merge it into the Docker Compose that we have here. Okay, a bit of PI. Okay. Okay, let me copy this here. Fantastic. We have this service. Let me delete this. And we are gonna call this Kerberos, not main anymore. And I guess we are good. All right, we are in this moment where we are gonna deploy on Balena this Docker Compose that we actually merged using BI some seconds ago. I hope this works, and because I'm not sure, I don't want to deploy it directly to all the fleet just in case there is a bug. So I want to test it locally on my device. To do that, I need Balena to install Balena CLI. I already have it. My recommendation is to Google Balena CLI or just go to GitHub, Balena -io Balena CLI, and just select your operating system. Okay. What I'm going to do right now, just to cover these rapid iterations or experimentations, it's to use local mode, to enable the local mode on my Raspberry Pi to do live push. And then testing locally on my Raspberry Pi before deploying in all the fleet, it's gonna allow me to avoid to deploy certain bugs, certain issues on the devices. So this is actually very handy to experiment if something is going to work or not on our fleet, selecting having a device on a local network and do this live push. So if you are installing Balena CLI, let's go to my device, Green Cherry, and it's on my local network, and I just click enable local mode. Okay, so when you're on local mode, you don't see any logs, you don't see anything. We are going to see those on here on the terminal. So to deploy to my device, actually, I can do Balena push. Well, let's do sudo Balena scan. With that, I'm going to see what are the Balena devices on my local network. Okay. So we see that I have a production device and a development device. So this is the device actually that I have. It's actually the same UUID. So I just copy this. And I'm going to do Balena push. And I'm going to push this locally to this device. Okay. I need to update. There is a new update available from Balena CLI. But now I'm pushing locally. Yeah, this new Docker Compose. This is something new, so it's deploying right now. There is no cache, and it works. It's so fast. So we have Kerberos and Netdata now running together. So to check that everything it's working properly, I'm gonna just copy the local IP address. So in theory, port 80, we should have Kerberos running. If that's correct. And actually on port 19999, if I'm not wrong, we should have Netdata showing us what's going on the device, all the metrics and analytics. This is so cool. So yeah, it looks like it works, right? It looks like the BI Docker Compose merge, it works really good. So yeah, let's deploy this on all of our fleet. So I will disable local mode. Well, yeah, let me stop here this, and let's disable local mode, and let's do release Balena push DockerCon 2022. That is the name of my fleet here. Can you see? And let's do it. All right, looks like, yeah, it worked. We can see Charlie the unicorn. That means that the deploy went well. And wow, what we see at balenaCloud actually right now is that the supervisor, it's stopping the service main, and yeah, it's downloading Kerberos and Netdata. All right, device is online finally. Public URL goes to Kerberos, and if we try the local IP address as before, I show port 99. Yeah, it works. Okay, so on this talk today, I show you what it takes to get started with a Docker container on Docker desktop, and then scale it from there to few devices, and actually just adding as many devices as you want. This scales, deploys and updates in the way that you saw actually some minutes ago. In this case, we just saw it's 4 devices, 2 in the US, 1 in Europe, 1 in India. But actually another public example that we have, it's a fault for COVID, which was a project where we create a cluster of embedded devices just to fold, just to help some researchers to fold the proteins to fight the COVID-19 virus a couple of years ago. And we had 7,000 of devices in parallel running and updating these devices and so on. But yes, of course, as well, we have customers with hundreds of thousands of devices connected that are working actually with similar patterns than the workflow that I show, using this live push with local mode, and actually using other techniques like pinning releases and using continuous integration and continuous deployment on their projects. So just to wrap up, we built a container on Docker Desktop. We moved this Docker container from Docker Desktop to an IoT device with some tweaks. It was not exactly the same, but it was based on the same Docker Hub image, actually. And we deployed these 3 devices with Balena. I did it almost live with you, and I hope that you could reproduce with me. Feel free to add on the chat the questions that you have and the problems that you have. Here is my email, and actually the slides from this talk are here on my GitHub repository on /talks. So you will see the DockerCon folder. Go there and find my slides and the links to the repositories. And finally thank you. Oh, wait. I think I'm gonna now deploy a new container on the Docker Compose Balena plan. No, I'm just joking. This is for next time. Thank you very much. Yeah, looking forward to get your messages. Bye.